And welcome to Talk Recovery Radio, everyone. It is season 7. My name is Giuseppe Ganci. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
What's going on, Giuseppe?
Season 7.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. Hundreds of shows, thousands of listeners.
Wow.
So pretty excited about that. And we're broadcasting live a week behind schedule on Vancouver CoOp Radio. And thank you on Vancouver CoOp Radio 100.5 FM. We've been bringing you Talk Recovery, a show about addiction recovery issues. We do our best at talking about all the pathways. And a little disclaimer, we even talk about abstinence-supported recovery as a positive thing on Talk Recovery Radio, unlike some other addiction shows that are out there in the land of British Columbia. All pathways are great, and that's what we do on a weekly basis every Thursday. And today's show is going to be just like that, where we got an awesome show ahead of you. But don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Talk Recovery Vancouver. If you're listening to us on the radio right now, we also go Facebook Live on that page. And if you're watching us on Facebook, thank you very much for joining us here on Facebook for the first show of season 7. And you can also replay the show on iTunes. We have a YouTube channel. Catch us on Talk Recovery, Twitter. And don't forget, replay all of our shows on SoundCloud. And you can get all that information on our website, talkrecoveryradio.com. It's been an interesting time off for the last couple of weeks. Darren and I took some time off because we were busy doing some stuff. Hey, Darren, Recovery Day, the Recovery Capital Conference.
Yeah, I mean, some busier than others, but yeah, September is Recovery Month. We had Recovery Day virtual celebration. 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks. Darren, you were the MC. What was it like emceeing a virtual Talk Recovery?
Well, I mean, over the last 8 years, I'm used to a crowd. Even 8 years ago, not like a couple of hundred, nonetheless, but still a crowd of people growing. To what did you say? 30,000 people came.
Yeah, we had about 30,000 people last year in the
New Westminster Block Music Festival of Recovery Day. And I mean, you're not getting 30,000 people listening to you all at once, right? I mean, it's a music show, but the things that need to be said, there's people out there, there's energy, and that didn't sink in until I'm on the stage at the virtual day, and it's just cameras and the people like you, the committee, and the guys running the cameras and that, and so it was strange, but I mean, that's sort of the way it's been rolling over the last few months, right?
14,000 people tuned into Recovery Day. So that was pretty awesome. Thank you to everyone that's viewed, shared, and everything. Our Recovery Day Facebook event, the Recovery Capital Conference. That's for healthcare professionals. That was held the day before. There was 1,500 people registered for that, so we're really excited about that. We're hoping Recovery Capital takes over and revolutionizes addiction healthcare here in Canada, where you assess, mentor, and measure outcomes and repeat and really help improve people's health outcomes by building on their strengths and measuring what we're doing when we do addiction care for people, rather than just 10-minute appointments, see you later. So go to My Recovery Plan. There's lots of information, myrecoveryplan.ca. Lots of information there on what we're trying to do with getting people to assess their recovery capital. We've got a great guest. She's on standby right now. Join us at the end of the show. We'll talk a little bit more about Recovery Day. We'll talk a little bit about Macklemore's moments on air. If you missed it, you got to watch it. It was pretty powerful.
And how can people rewatch that?
So they can go to facebook.com/recovery day, and just scroll through there and they'll find the live feed, or they can go to recoverydaybc.ca and it's on the homepage. You just click the button and you'll be able to watch it and replay the show there. So we'll talk at the end of the show about Malcolm Moore's conversation, and if we have time, we'll also talk about an amazing performance done by Kia, which was Black Indigenous People of Color spoken word. If you missed that, you got to watch that too. So stick around for later on in the show when we bring back Recovery Day. Right now, we've got a guest on the show that's going to kick off season 7. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Yeah, excellent. Please welcome. We get to talk recovery with Shona Marie. Shona.
Disconnecting audio. I think we're there. Hello. Connecting audio.
There we are.
There we are.
Gotta love Zoom.
That's awesome. We always have a few seconds of just, can they hear us?
Are you out there?
Is it Shona or Shona?
Shona. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Shona Marie, welcome to the show. Welcome to Talk Recovery. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
So we're here to talk a little bit about your first book. You wrote a book. Anytime we've had a first-time author, it must be pretty cool, because usually authors are, that have a book out, it may not have been a childhood dream, but it's something that, came with, oh, this is going to be too much, and like to really see it in fruition must be amazing for you.
It's funny, I'm a pretty creative person, and so I love doing anything that takes thought and creativity. But I always kind of, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I think I might write a book one day. But here I was thinking it'd be this nice, like, fairy tale, like walk in the woods type story and twists and turns. And, I didn't actually think this would be a book. It kind of started off as, you should really write out your story. You should really like process what you've been through and take the time to journey through that. And so I saw value in that. So I started doing that, and I sat down to write it, and I was like, oh, where do you even start? What do you even say?
Right.
And I thought, you know what, if I was sitting across from a stranger and they said, tell me your story, I would think, well, what would they need to know about me? What are the key things they'd need to know? So I wrote it as if I was like just telling someone my story. And about, 9 months in and 10 chapters in, I'm on the phone with my mom, and I'm like, I think I wrote a book.
Wow.
I think I have a book here. And she's really well versed in writing and what have you, and works in film. And I said, would you edit it? And maybe we can take it somewhere. And lo and behold, I literally started writing it out like, a year and 2 months ago. And now here it is, like a physical book. Being in the day and age we live in, you can do that, which is crazy.
Right. So this is all very fresh. I like you say, don't we all wish, we could do an autobiographic novel. Sorry, that just came out wrong.
Say that 5 times.
And it be like just a wonderful, beautiful, pride-filled story to share with someone. But those stories, those books, those autobiographies just aren't the interesting ones that we as human beings want to like relate to and connect with. Like everybody has, your book is called Steady the Storm. Everybody's got the storm, whether they try to present themselves without one or not, everybody's got it. And as soon as somebody takes the risk to share that, there's a connection. I looked on your website, where is it? Shona Marie. Oh, it didn't come up in color on my printed sheet. What is your website?
The website's Steady in the Storm book.
Yeah, there's like Steady in the Storm, which is just sort of like a blog that I started to coincide with the book, because like I said, the book kind of just evolved. And yeah, so I'd say that's more like work in progress here. I'm not sure if there was something specific you wanted to mention about that, but
well, just that from what I read, the storm is a lot of the relationship with your husband.
Yes. Yeah. So when you say like, Go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to give him a shout out. I'm sure he had to agree with you telling his part of the story.
Yes.
And again, that stuff that we don't want written about us in a book, but if we all just step back and appreciate what you and Rhett, is it?
Rhett, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rhett has done, like, by, you know, sharing your guys' story, we get to have these conversations and engage with people that are on the precipice of, you know, potentially having to share their story and save their own lives. So shout out to Rhett.
Shout out to Rhett.
Let's talk, because we haven't had someone, you know, strictly on the outside looking into addiction on the show in a while. So this is a great topic, a great perspective. A lot of moms, partners, you know, dads, like so many individuals that are in your situation, you know, and are clueless. So how about just a little background of what inspired the book?
Oh man. Well, I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, and she talks a lot about how sharing your story is the most courageous thing you can do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel courageous, and it feels scary, and it feels messy. But like you say, everyone's got a storm, whatever it is. And I feel like this year has maybe highlighted that for a lot of people, right? Sort of the chaos of 2020. Everyone's going, whoa, like I didn't sign up for this. And yeah, like when you give a shout out to my husband, like I let him read the book, and obviously, like I said, I'm not going to do anything with this unless you approve it, right? You're okay with it. And the book really is more about sort of me and my journey. And I kind of leave Rhett's journey alone as much as I can, because I keep telling him, you should write a book, you know, like you should put this out there. But yeah, like everyone's got a storm. Everyone's got something happening behind closed doors that they don't want to talk about, right? But it's funny, as soon as you start talking about something, you realize how many people are going through it. You're like, whoa, okay, that's not just me, which is Brené Brown's whole conversation of like, I thought it was just me. Yes. And then you find out it's everyone, whether it be addiction or depression, or, you know, the list could go on and on and on. And when we start like sharing our stories and talking about that, that's where the empathy grows. And that's where you start feeling less alone. Like my husband says, you know, he's like, we were talking about this with family the other day. He's like, I'm not unique. Like my story isn't unique. Like I am probably the biggest cookie cutter out there as far as, you know, people struggling with addiction and what have you. The difference is that we're talking about it. Right.
Exactly.
And, yeah. So when I was like, when we were kind of in the height of the relapse, let's say, I was just begging for resources. You know, I was asking counselors, family, friends, even my medical doctor. I was like, do you have anything for me? Like, give me something. Like, I was just, you know, give me a podcast even, right? Like something to tell me that like, I'm not crazy, that what I'm going through isn't insane, that I'm not losing my mind. Because I grew up in a pretty sheltered world. So I knew my husband had history with addiction, but I more viewed it as like, oh, that's in the past, right?
Past, yeah.
So when it surfaced, it like, I felt like I was being dragged by a horse, you know, like
Did you go through a phase of you wanted to fix him when you were like looking for these resources, or was it right away like, I can't fix him, like I need to help myself? Because a lot of times when you, not a lot, almost all the time, because we work in a treatment facility as well, most of the time it's people don't think they need the help. It's just like, how can you help me fix him? Mm-hmm. Did you go through that phase? And if you did, how did you get out of it? Because we always tell wives or partners or families like, no, you need to fix yourself. And there's that codependency and all that. So did you go through that phase, and how did you get out of it?
I think like I did go through that phase for sure. I kind of like describe it as like, again, being dragged by a horse. You're only dragged by a horse for so long before you're like, this is not sustainable. And so I feel like I went through that, but it was very rapid. I think I held on to maybe pieces of it, but sort of the overall like, oh, I'm going to handle this, did not last long, because it went from 0 to 60, you know, very quickly. My husband has also had two pretty major phases of sobriety as well. So like this kind of wasn't his first rodeo. And he told me like right off the bat, like, you can't do anything. Like, you can't fix me. Like, I have to go through this. And I was like, what are you even talking about? You know? So he was actually almost educating me on like, you need to go to Al-Anon, you need to get help. And I'm like, I need to get help. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not the one, you know, running off the rails here. And so I feel like it was a very like a duct tape band-aid coming off of like, I'm going to try and fix you. I'm going to pray us through this. I have no idea what I'm doing, to like, what now? So I would say, yes, I went through that, but it was a very quick, and that's kind of what made it so traumatic journey. Right. So yeah, kind of that whole realization of like, wait a second, like, what's my role in this? What do I need to focus on? That whole concept of you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. All kind of played into it, which is what I go into in the book, of kind of those things of like, you know, I needed to focus on me or my community or what have you. Like, I need to make sure I was well, because if we both go down, then what? That's
You
when it
said
gets
your
so
husband
scary.
had two major episodes of sobriety. So my question then would be, a lot of people, there's a huge world in social media that's almost anti-recovery, and just simply like, you know, recovery doesn't work. You know, if you have somebody who's tried sobriety twice, was there ever that moment where it's like, oh, this isn't working, maybe we just need to like reduce the harm in your life? Or, you know, was there a lack of faith in did he do a 12-step program? If he's mentioning Al-Anon to you, was it like, I'm not doing that stuff anymore? Because that is a very common question
Mhm.
out there in social media world. Well, if sobriety didn't work, then that means sobriety is not working for him. We come from the page, well, maybe he's, you know, he didn't do what he needed to do to stay sober. So what do you do after having two major sober times and a major relapse?
That's a great question, and maybe more of a question for him. I can kind of like show you my perspective of that.
Yeah.
I To us, like, sobriety was the goal, right? Like, sobriety is the goal, recovery is the goal. I like I more I more subscribe to recovery than anything. I mean, liken it to a knee injury, right? Say you've gotten the old football injury, right? And you've done physio and what have you, and then it's hurting again, and you go back to the doctor, and they're not going to tell you like, oh, well, let's just reduce harm. They're going to say like, oh, maybe we need to do surgery, right? Get this fixed. So yeah, I think like if you want to pursue that healthy lifestyle, that lifestyle where um yeah to me it's almost not a conversation, like recovery is the answer. um like even just this morning, like my husband posted a meme that said like, you sobriety isn't the only goal, it's creating a life that you don't need to escape from, right? It's
Oh, that's awesome.
creating that life that is recovery, that is sobriety. You know, what are you escaping from if recovery isn't working, right?
Which brings up like, you know, I wonder if this is a conflict in like marriages or partnerships, in that, in this sense where, you know, the addict might have a little understanding of what needs to happen. You know, you need to go fix yourself, and there's a separation, you know, that an understanding that you can't do anything for him. You know, he's obviously, you know, incapable of showing support. So it's like this separation. Is there a question, because we're then going to have, you know, resources potentially, you know, telling him to maybe just, you know, get on methadone, maybe just do this. When would there be a conversation or a say in your part? No, you need to be recovery. If this marriage is going, you know, you need to be abstinent, or, you know, well, let's see what happens with some harm reduction stuff. Like, do you know what I mean? There has to be that separation of getting help oneself, but also, you know, mutual understanding and agreement on what to pursue. was there ever that for you? Did you ever find yourself either having a say or not having a say?
Yeah, I mean, it did come to a head, right? Like, I wasn't willing to be in a marriage where addiction was running it. It just wasn't an option for me. And so it was a fight of like recovery or the marriage.
Hmm.
And it did have to come to that at one point. Like, look, either I said, like, I feel like I've put all my cards on the table, like I can't do anything more, like you got to play a card, or like this can't go on, right? And I think the thing too is, it was heartbreaking to watch my husband not want addiction and not be able to get out of it.
Right.
Because he would say the whole time, like, I want the marriage, like I don't want to be doing this, I don't want to be drinking, that's not what I want to do, like I don't want to go to the bar, like it's not, like I don't want that life. But also it was to the point of like, I don't know how to not choose it right now.
Right.
And
what made you stay through all of these acts of him suggesting, I'm choosing this, or I'm choosing the addiction or the drink or the drug before our marriage? Like, how long were you willing to go? Was there an end? Who gave you the advice to stay? What told you what to do in those moments?
yeah, what a roller coaster. I mean, if you're in the middle of that, like, it feels like there's no right answer, it feels like staying is wrong, it feels like leaving is wrong, it feels like every day you wake up doing the wrong thing and you don't know what to do, right? And yeah, I would say, some people were very hard-lined one way and very hard-lined the other way.
Right.
And I was sort of stuck in the middle with like, what's right? And like, I have to be honest, like it was, God and my higher power that kept me sane, that kept me stable, which is why the book is steady in the storm, right? The storm was all around me, but trying to find that stability of like, I know, like deep within me, like I knew that like this was the man that I was meant to be with. And so it didn't I couldn't make sense of it. I'm like, how do I know that this is the person I'm supposed to be with, yet the situation I'm currently in is extremely unhealthy? And what do you do in that? And yeah, like our marriage went through times of separation where we, it was very much like we were separated. You have to leave for a while, or you have to figure something out, or I'm leaving for a while. And there were moments where it wasn't as intense, right? And I was able to make that decision of like, oh, it's a little more okay right now, we can get through this, like we're actually doing pretty good right now. And then it would ramp up, or it would disappear, and then it would ramp up, right? And so it did ebb and flow. It wasn't like complete intensity all the time. It ebbed and flowed, and I was like, oh, okay, we're doing okay right now, like now we can go to a counselor and talk some things out and it'll be okay. And then it would dip again, and then it's like, oh my goodness, nothing's okay, what do I do? And so it was learning to hold on to what I knew was truth within me, and trying to see the truth through the mud, essentially.
And
Yeah.
and a lot of individuals, that sort of, maybe are raised atheist, just really in times of a storm, don't have an anchor, don't have a source of interpersonal reflection that allows them to truly believe what you're doing right now is what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so your faith was that component when you're getting, you're not being supportive and you're being too codependent in there for you. Your faith allowed you to know, or at least believe, and like have the faith that this is for you, what to do. And that is, that go get help, go help yourself component is just that those individuals need sort of that, whether it's talking to a group of other people or their community at church. Now, I want to ask you, like, specifically someone within a faith, of religion, from my perspective, sometimes it's like, you know, to be a part of the church, everything's got to be sort of looking good, presented well. And so I sort of question, are all these people doing that well and have that much faith, or are they just hiding? Because that's human nature. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did you take that risk within your church, like to expose what's going on? Could you, you know, sort of been admittedly a religious person if you hadn't have done that? And
A great question. Totally. I feel like there's 7 different things I could say. First off, yes, I've been in the church my whole life, and it drives me nuts. The church is as tidy as it is.
awesome.
You know, if we're going to have that conversation, like Jesus came for the sick, he came for the lost, he came for the broken. So why isn't the church full of broken, sick people? I don't get it. Right. Like, we actually were part of like a home group at the time where we met with a very small selective group of friends every week, and we would make dinner together and eat together and share our weeks and share our faith. And that became our church, because we, like, Rhett and I actually got really tired of like the production, shall we call it, of church. And I don't want to bash the church. I don't want to say they're doing it wrong. I think the church does really great things, but like there is a bit of a production value, whether you're at the front of the church or sitting in the church, right? Like it is very like, oh, we don't talk about that here. And why aren't we talking about it? Like, why, you know? And like our home group knew what was going on. They knew what was going on the whole time. I couldn't get through if they didn't. That wasn't an option. It wasn't an option to keep it secret for me. It took me a while to kind of tell my family what was going on, because I just struggled with like, oh, they'll think that I, you know, chose the love of my life wrong. And I was afraid to have that conversation. But like our church community knew. Fast forward kind of down the line, when it came to like treatment or no marriage, we financially just couldn't afford treatment. I mean, you guys talk about that all the time, you know, the treatment systems and how backed up they are, and you got to have money to be sober, really, if you really want to face facts. And to tighten up the story a bit, we miraculously found a spot for Rhett in our home city that he could go to. I had a friend who actually worked for a treatment center, and I was just, you know, bawling my eyes out over what was going on with her, because she got it, she knew what was going on. And a couple of phone calls later, he was there within 2 days, but I had no idea how we were going to pay for it. So we, you know, I talked with Rhett and I said, look, like I think we should do a GoFundMe for this, because we can't do it. We need help. And so our story for some people went from like, oh, Rhett and Shona are having a great time camping, to like, Shona just posted on Facebook that Rhett's in treatment. And that was hard, because within seconds of me posting like, hey, just so you know, on Facebook, like, obviously it was a pretty lengthy post and what have you, my phone like lit up with text messages and phone calls and Facebook messages of like, donations and how are you doing, and you guys have been on my heart for months. I knew something was going on, like I'd been praying for you, like thank you for telling me. I had people messaging me going, my sister's been in treatment, we went through this with my dad, you know, like all of a sudden all these stories started coming out of like, hey, us too. And I probably, like, every time my phone went off with a notification, I'd bawl my eyes out, because it was like, oh my goodness, like we're not alone. Like people can help us, and we're actually helping people by telling them they're not alone. Yeah. And it was like this amazing roller coaster of like turmoil, because, you know, my husband's in treatment, but also like, oh my goodness, people are amazing. Like God is amazing. Look how this is coming through. And we actually paid for his treatment 100% through that GoFundMe and through the support of people. And it was, I feel like I'm going to cry all over again. Like it just was this incredible, like, look how much we're loved and supported and people believe in you. And you know, we had to, right? You got to the point where it's not an option to keep the doors closed and the house nice. Like, here's our closet, we need help, you know, like we don't know what to do. And it was incredible to
I mean,
be
and
exposed.
just it speaks to, if you're struggling, if there is an issue, if there's some ugliness going on in your life, like you're only causing that whole situation so much harm by not sharing it for fear of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be able to experience, you know, the true act of God and the true act of support and the true act of love, you needed to shine light on it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
and we need to like this conversation is so crucial because so many people do not talk about the benefits of asking for help and being public with asking for help. Like it's killing people. Everyone says, you know, that there's a stigma about addiction, and Darren and I have had some chatter back and forth on this. There's more of a stigma with recovery. It's just because the person using usually doesn't want to get sober, so you know, doesn't want to ask for help because they don't want to get sober, and so the idea, picture employees, so many employees call our intake line. My boss can't know, I can't take time off work. Can I do like a 3-day treatment program so I can be back at work by Monday? And it's like, and then it's always the same sentence. I don't know anyone, like for over a decade I've worked here, I don't know anyone that's been fired because they went to treatment to do recovery. I don't know anyone that's lost their wife or family or anything because they went to recovery. But I can list you like tons of names of people that have lost their job, lost their families, and are dead because they didn't do recovery or they didn't do treatment. So it's just an interesting, the irony in it is unbelievable. And the fact that you went to a very scary place, the church, to let them all know, like, hey, I've got problems. Here's my dirty laundry. And can you help me pay for it? And the thing is, it's like people have good hearts. I went through in the beginning of my recovery journey, I just thought everybody sucked and no one helps and the world's a horrible place. And the reality is when you start a couple of days of doing some reaching out, you realize the world's a beautiful place. Like everyone's willing to help. Most people are anyway. So give you props for that. So the book is called Steady in the Storm. It's on Amazon. It's on your website. You write a blog now. I didn't catch. Is it like a weekly blog, a monthly blog, just whenever?
I haven't really done a schedule with it yet. It's not something I want to force. I think like when it kind of how I wrote the book, like it wasn't something I forced. It was just something I sort of let evolve. And so that's kind of the same way I'm taking the blog right now, is just letting it evolve, is sort of it feels like there's lots of content right now when you're talking about Storm being this year that we're in, but as things sort of resonate or land with me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's something that I could write about. I don't want it to become like this, oh, it's Monday afternoon, time to post. I want it to be authentic. And so sometimes with authenticity, there's pauses between posts.
Well, I go through that too. I do lots of social media. There's all these programs out there to do, you know, program blogs on certain schedules. I'm like, yeah, then it feels like a robot. I'm not doing any of it. Just, you know, fly by the hip.
Yeah.
So for other wives out there, so your husband's in recovery.
Yeah.
Okay. How much, obviously your life's changed. A lot of wives out there, you know, just husband, go to rehab, you know, come back home and let's live our lives, you know, the way we're supposed to. And some women will do some therapy and some won't. How much, like, despite the book and the blogging, because that's obviously takes up time, you know, picture there was no book and there was no blogging. How much has your life changed to support your husband in recovery? And what suggestions do you give other wives?
That's a great question. It's funny when Rhett went to treatment, which he's actually coming up on 1 year of sobriety next month, which we're pretty excited about. So almost the full year. When he went into treatment, I was like, I need treatment. Like I'm desperate for treatment. Like someone said me somewhere to like recover, because like he went to treatment and I went to work And now I'm at work not knowing what's going to happen in a month and what have you. Like, I felt really lost. It took me 3 weeks to get in with our counselor, and I want to talk to my counselor about my husband going into treatment. And now I'm talking with my counselor about my husband's coming out of treatment in a month or in a week. Like, what happens now? I was like pretty desperate to make sure that I was in a healthy place for him. And when he got out of treatment, I actually said to him, like, you can't come home yet. Like, I'm not ready for you. Like, it's too soon for me. And so he actually went and got an Airbnb, and it was another month before I was like, okay, we can maybe try this. I would say, like, here's the funny thing is, like, I went to Al-Anon, and like there were max 10 people in the room. My husband goes to AA and there's 40 people in the room. And I'm like, how are there not 150 people in Al-Anon right now? You take one addict and they love 5 people, and then you multiply that, and you're lucky sometimes if you get 6 people at Al-Anon. I'm like, where are all the people? Because clearly there's a lot of addicts out there. Like, where, you talk about owning your story and what you're going through, and it's pretty shaming to say, like, my husband's an alcoholic. So admitting that to people can be really hard. But I would say, like there shouldn't be shame in something that, like my husband says, is common, So yeah, I would say, like, for me, like, supporting him in his journey, like, sobriety isn't just an AA meeting. When he got out of treatment, it was AA, it was the gym, it was healthy eating, it was connecting with friends, it was a healthy spiritual life. And I would say my list doesn't look much different. It's talking with friends, it's maintaining a good, healthy spiritual life, it's maintaining, a good mindset, right? Checking myself in moments of like, oh, am I about to start a fight that I'm going to blame him for later? Like, what does that look like?
It's a mind FCK. It's just like,
Well,
Mhm.
Go ahead,
and
Jeff.
well, I just think all those things, it's like, we often see it as a program for somebody who's, weak or had some trouble, when really it is a preparation for, us as human beings to weather a storm that's eventually
Yeah.
going to come. So
Mhm.
why it would be something that just one person does, and rather look at it as like, this is if I got to keep doing these things so that I, hopefully don't ever relapse. It's like, well, it's to live the best life. If you're living the best life, then relapse is like non-existent.
Yeah.
And to have that understanding from a partner is just all the better. And yeah, why people don't see it, well, I mean, when you live with addiction, that's a pretty big problem that makes yours not seem, like you need to have a program for, right? And I think
Right.
that's a bit of the mentality, is that, we're not, that's definitely something, a heroin addiction or alcoholism or, so on and so forth. They need to do a lot of work.
Mhm.
And, I just get obsessive and compulsive about cleaning my apartment. Like, what do I need? But it's not about those things. It's,
Yeah.
coming together in that sense. And I'm just wondering, like, when you live with addiction, and it seems like it's the worst of all, it doesn't get any worse, and then they get help, and there's this sort of relief from that chaos, but then there's this initiation of panic and fear of how long will this last.
Mhm.
And I think that's a very common theme. Is there any way of getting through that without talking to other people? Like, is it worth just like waiting and hoping that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like, okay, we overcame treatment and now you're home and now you're sober, and now it feels like there's 700 other things we need to now overcome. And yeah, I would say, when you're talking about 2 people going through a marriage and going through addiction, like, marriage doesn't work unless you're both committed. If I wasn't committed to getting through and Rhett was, then it wasn't going to work. If Rhett was committed to getting through and I wasn't, it's not going to work. And I would say sometimes it can be the same with sobriety, right? Like, we both have to be committed to what we're doing here. and maintaining sobriety is now just part of our healthy marriage.
Such an important statement you just made there. You know, if the wife and husband aren't on the same page, like
Yeah.
you drinking, I don't, maybe you are, but are you drinking like nice martinis every night with a big bottle of wine on the table every day? You know, there needs to be some changes in the family, and not to say both partners need to be sober, but changes need to be made. I have a question. We're going to be running out of time pretty soon. Something that I think we see a lot between husbands and wives, the idea of forgiveness. And Darren and I chatted about this at the beginning of before you were on. How do you forgive? And Darren, you had said earlier, I'm stealing your question, Darren. You know, do you have a list of what's forgivable and what's not forgivable in your mind on the back of your neck? Like, we're talking about some raw issues here and so forth. So what was your forgiveness process? Are you still forgiving, always forgiving?
Yeah, that's a process, right? Like, we're both broken people. I'm broken too, right? And you know, sometimes we'll fight about something and I'm like, oh, I'm still holding on to that. Like, I still need to forgive that, right? Like, it happens over and over and over. And you know, the topic of, is something not forgivable? Well, you know, if you ask Jesus, no. If you ask someone who can't comprehend it, then maybe, right? I don't know. I think that's everyone's journey. But like, yeah, we've been through some tough stuff, and the process of rebuilding trust, to go back to Darren's question, and forgiving are almost hand in hand, right? Like, if I'm not trusting him, does that mean I haven't forgiven him? And what does that look like? And I think it's still a process of forgiveness, right? Like, it's still a process of like, oh yeah, right, I'm still holding on to that, and I'm not holding on to it as hard, and it's not as painful, but it's still there. And am I choosing to trust the progression I have seen over the last 11 months, or am I still holding on to like those 2 years of chaos and assuming it's just a sleeping volcano? You know, like, what is it? Like a cancer patient in remission, like, do you live like your cancer's coming back, or do you live in the remission? And you know, we choose to live in the sobriety, we choose to live in the recovery of it, not in the like, oh, this is a sleeping giant that's going to attack us again, right? And so you kind of have to take it that day to day of like, you know, it's been a hard year, and for sobriety to have been consistent through everything we've experienced, when there's been, you know, more relapses and overdoses this year than ever, like, we're looking at it going, whoa, like,
Addiction
you're still
change.
sober, this is great, like, we're doing good, you know?
Yeah, it's so important to keep that perspective through this, you know, those things that are working, you know, the people we do have, you know, the miracles, if you will, that are happening in life. And I think it's, you know, it's really easy to be pessimistic and to look around and think everything's doom and gloom. And then I just wonder, like, where have I reached out? Where have I needed help and kept that to myself to keep my perspective pessimistic? Because like your story so much explains, once I'm able to share a little vulnerability and you know, just allow myself to be truthful with what I'm going through, and then there's every engagement and conversation and relationship and, you know, a hand that reminds me of the value in life, you know, through that stuff. And there's so many metaphors, whether it be religion or you know, programs of recovery and you know, just human nature in and of itself, of how important it is to have community in life, you know.
Yeah.
And so was Rhett a religious person as well beforehand? And I wonder, like, did that grow for him, or, you know, did he discover a lot of shame as a result of not living up to sort of the religious principles that people think they should? Was that
Yeah.
difficult for him?
Yeah, I mean, him finding his faith was his first real, I'm gonna get you should interview him. He'd be a great guest for you. But like, one of his big areas of sobriety was when he found his faith and all of that. And Rhett will tell you straight up, you know, he is who he is. You know, he's not going to hide who he is. He's not embarrassed of his past. If anything, he's like this, you know, the strongest person I know, because he owns what he's been through. And yeah, I mean, everyone struggles with shame, but I would say like he's pretty resilient to his shame, I would say. And yeah, he doesn't really believe in, like, you know, hiding who you are and sort of that let's play nice and all be perfect humans. That's like repelling to him. He's more like, if you don't be real with me and tell me who you are, I don't think I can have you in my life type of a person.
I once you've acknowledged or lived through an experience where that component like saved your life or saved someone you love, you know, that just sort of, you know, truth of who wanted, you cannot ever have a surface relationship after that. Like it needs to be, you know, coming from a deep place.
Which is tough because no one wants to do that, right?
Exactly.
So we don't have a lot of friends.
We're the ones sort of like paving the way. And I think of like just, it takes one, you know, and that the community that you were in, like how much they needed and benefited from somebody taking the risk, you know. And I just think that that experience can help so many. And then, you know, to not minimize it, like so many people just sort of go on with their life, and yet there's this potential for being there for the next person. You know, and that's what we've tried to always be about, is sort of like breaking through that anonymity or that keeping it as sort of a secret, and just go back to work and do your 9 to 5 and actually like share it and continue to share it, write a book about it, blog about it, so that there's that many more people that can sort of, you know, help build some courage.
And just to like, maybe even as a final comment for you, which kind of, I never got to this at the end, that was ultimately why I was like, I think this needs to be a book. Because when I was looking for content, when I was looking for something to tell me that I wasn't the unicorn over here, I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. And so I'm like, you know what? Like if someone can read this and go, oh my goodness, I'm not alone, then it's worth the vulnerability. And if someone can find that strength of like what they can hold on to in the midst of their storm, then it's worth the exposure. And that's ultimately what sort of pushed me to publish it, was like, you know what, this was the book I needed. This was the book I was looking for. And literally everyone I asked, the only recommendations they could give me were books on, well, here's a book about addiction. And I'm like, but I'm not the addict. Like I need a book on like the me's. Where am I in this? And ultimately that was why I saw worth in the book, was like, you know what, like there's not enough out there for people sharing their stories of like, you know, my beloved fill in the blank is struggling with addiction and I don't know what to do.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today, because like there are a lot of yous out there that need to engage. And the book is Steady the Storm, Shona Marie.
Steady in the storm.
Steady in the storm.
Yeah.
My guy said steady the storm.
Yeah, I think you got the word in. He's on holiday.
It has to be in, because you're not trying to calm the storm. You're trying to find stability within the storm.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have named it Steady the Storm. I didn't want to bring it up, but no.
That would have been a terrible name. That would have been you controlling the storm.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
We tried.
Yeah, you'll try, but it's not going to work.
Well, all the best to you.
Thank you so much.
And Rhett. And yeah, we'll await Rhett to write his book, and yeah, let's talk. We'll have him on too.
Yeah, we definitely. We always love personal stories, lived experience stories as well. Don't forget, there's also a Facebook page, facebook.com/steadyinthestorm. And the links are here in the post as well and all that. So if you're watching this on Facebook, if you're listening to us on the radio, You can, go to our Facebook page and get all the links to buy the book and read her blogs and also join her Facebook page as well. Thank you so much. We're going to pass this on to our partners group here at Last Door. They're always looking for new material and so forth. And, it's the best way to help your loved one recover from substance use is for you to get help yourself. And there's I always say this too. It's like the gig is up when you get what's going on. Did you get that where you're like, I know what's going on. You know what I mean? It's just like, the unveil the whole, it's not his fault syndrome and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for being on the show. You're our first guest in season 7
Yeah.
years of shows.
Congratulations, 7 seasons.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we'll get you back on the show another time. And good luck with the book. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So we're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. Thanks for tuning in. Let's keep the Co-op radio station flowing, make some donations.
Yeah, coopradio.org is where you can make donations.
There you go.
Yeah, the studio's still closed. That's why we're here in Facebook land and in Zoom land. And the radio station almost opened, but then they decided to close it again. And Darren and I both made a decision. I'm not really going in anyway and doing it on this platform. So I hope you like this platform. We don't have a choice anyway right now, but I just don't feel like going into a studio on the downtown east side with a bunch of microphones that a lot of other people have been using. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe we'll get our own mics, Darren, and go in anyway. But I like this format.
It's convenient for sure. There's a part of me, by no means did I think I was directly saving anybody's life by, driving down in the downtown east side every week to do the show. But I don't know, there was just a real experience of seeing how bad it is, running into people that I had relationships with in the past. And just same in line with the recovery day, not seeing the people and their expressions, it leaves a little detachment. And I miss that, and we're just rolling through it. But the people that are suffering the worst are, those that could potentially be the ones reaching out in that moment of running into somebody in that sense. So, I feel like my life's good and it's great, and but I miss that availability of going out places and having these events being publicly attended. It's tough. It's tough.
It's tough, but you know what? It's still a safe space to be vulnerable. And we had an experience at Recovery Day which kind of reassured to me that this whole Zoom world, online world, there's still an opportunity. Obviously our guest here was vulnerable and shared her experience, strength, and hope. But with Malcolm or Darren at Recovery Day, you were the MC asking questions. I was behind the scenes, and there was a moment of like, what's going on here? And we were behind schedule, and all of a sudden Macklemore probably gave us one of the biggest compliments ever, where he actually expressed a story that we weren't expecting, and he just, we were able to provide a safe space for him to talk about a very recent relapse that he had. Darren, what was going through your mind when that happened?
Well, I don't necessarily want to talk in detail about his. Please watch Recovery Day, like the virtual, and you can see what he said. What was going on for me was that it was the epitome of the whole purpose beyond Recovery Day, is that enough people can gather and can share and announce and be available for those people that are just like I said earlier in the show, on the precipice of wanting to reach out, wanting to say I need help, wanting to say my life is ugly right now. Because that tree that we have hanging with all the people's names that have died as a result of addiction, or overdose or whatever, I believe those names are hanging there because just in that moment, instead of reaching out, instead of like, because I'm not saying that's a bad thing or they were weak. I've been in that position so many times where it's just, I know I should, but I won't. And, because there was too big a risk or whatever my excuse was. So if we get enough people like sharing their truths, then there's that much less of an excuse for that individual to make, saying there wasn't anybody there, I didn't know, or I was all alone, or and all of that reasoning behind why we don't reach out could be the last opportunity to reach out. And so when he opened up, it was, like I said, it was just the whole reason, because sometimes it's like you expect the message to be everything's amazing, my life is great, but sometimes a message is even strongest when it's just the truth, and I'm struggling, and I need to say this for the benefit of other people, because
that's why I'm the chair of Recovery Day, and that show was a lot of work. Like it wasn't easy, and it was a lot of work, and sometimes you're like, why am I doing this? Like it's 12:30 at midnight, and I'm still at the office, and in that moment I was just like, that's why we do it. It's just so somebody out there can hear the concept that it's okay to ask for help. And our first guest showed it with her group of friends. It's like, hey, I'm vulnerable, I need help, and the whole world, her world anyway, supported her, and I'm sure Malcolm Moore's world supported him too. And the power of honesty, that's awesome.
And to even do it after people are expecting you to say something else, like these are the people that have relapsed.
That wasn't part of the script.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
He's got notoriety, man. And when somebody with that amount of notoriety does that, like, I just have the world of appreciation for them, because people are listening, and people are, inspired and sometimes mimicking what these people are doing. So
if you missed the show, you can go to recoverydaybc.ca. On the homepage, click the play button. You can replay the show, and he's somewhere in there. You can fast forward it or watch the whole thing. Talk Recovery.
Check out Kia on that if you're gonna.
And Kia, listen, and Christina. Christina did it. Miles Murphy, the big country singer. It was a great show.
Amazing.
Lots of awesome stuff on there. Darren and Lizzie from Hilarity were the MCs. Shout out to Lizzie. Thank you, Lizzie. And Darren, you did a great job. We got a minute left. Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery. New West Recovery is made up of Last Door Recovery Center in Westminster House, youth and adult, boys and girls addiction treatment. We call ourselves Canada's recovery capital, and 7 years of shows we've been doing, and we looking forward to bringing more guests on air for you. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Darren, thanks for putting up with me for 7 years.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye, everybody. See you next week.